Okay, so the big news, you really can't miss it right now. This escape from the Orleans Justice Center.
In New Orleans, yeah. Happened just yesterday, May 16th.
10 inmates. Well, that's the story we're diving into today.
It is. It's definitely a dramatic local event, for sure.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, doesn't it, about the kind of bigger picture.
Exactly.
So for this deep dive, we've been looking at the news reports, obviously, on this specific escape, getting the details, and also some analysis that's starting to come out. But then we're broadening out, looking at, global trends, how escapes happen elsewhere, and how prisons try to stop them.
Right. So the mission here, for you listening, is to really get under the surface. Not just that 10 people escaped, but like how? What were the actual steps?
The mechanics of it.
Yeah, the mechanics. And maybe even more crucial, why could this happen? What were the vulnerabilities there? And then, placing this New Orleans story in that wider context, prison security escapes. It's a whole world.
It really is.
Okay, so let's start unpacking New Orleans. Yeah. What do we know about the timeline?
Well, the timeline itself is pretty revealing. It happened early morning, May 16th. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually discovered until the 8:30 a.m. head count.
Wait, 8:30 a.m., so they escaped in the early hours.
Exactly. That's a delay of, over 7 hours?
Oh, 7 hours. That's a massive head start.
A huge head start. Think about how far you could get.
Seriously.
Right.
And the method. The reports mention something about a toilet.
Yeah, it sounds almost basic in a way, but clearly effective. They removed a toilet sink unit from their cell.
The whole combo unit?
Apparently, yeah. And doing that created an opening, a hole in the wall.
Okay.
Then on top of that, they'd somehow tampered with the cell door lock. So wall breach, door lock bypassed.
Right. Then what?
From there, it seems they got into some kind of maintenance area, navigated through that, exited via a loading dock. Then they had to get over the perimeter fence.
Which has barbed wire, presumably.
Oh, yeah. Reports say they used blankets, threw them over the barbed wire to scale it.
Clever. Or desperate.
Probably both. And then finally, they crossed a nearby interstate. It's like something out of, a movie plot.
It really is. But this actually happened. So that toilet sink thing. How secure are those normally meant to be? Is that like a known weak spot?
That's a really good question. I mean, usually prison fixtures, they're supposed to be designed with security right at the forefront. Tamper-proof, very solid.
Right.
So for them to just remove it like that, it suggests, either a major design flaw in that specific unit or maybe serious deterioration. Lack of maintenance, maybe?
Or it was weakened somehow over time.
That's possible, too. And the fact they went through a maintenance area, that also flags potential gaps in security for those, non-inmate zones.
Right. Those should be secure, too.
Absolutely. And what's interesting here is it seems like a mix, doesn't it? Like maybe some planning was involved, but they were also definitely exploiting existing weaknesses. Removing that fixture, that probably took some coordination, some effort.
And 10 of them got.
10 in total. Now, 3 have been recaptured since. Kendall Miles, Robert Moody, and Trican and Dennis.
Okay, so 3 back.
But that leaves 7 still out there, and some of them were facing really serious charges, including murder, so understandably that's causing major concern locally.
You bet. So why? Why this facility, the Orleans Justice Center? What factors made this possible there? The reports point to a few things, right?
Yeah, several worrying factors seem to be emerging. First, just the building itself, the infrastructure.
What about it?
There were apparently known issues, faulty locks, even structural weaknesses, which, kind of lines up with the toilet sink removal.
Yeah, the idea that a fixture like that isn't secure enough to stop someone creating an escape route, that's pretty basic, isn't it? Why wouldn't they get fixed?
Well, it often boils down to a mix of things. Money, obviously. Budget constraints can mean maintenance gets deferred, cheaper materials get used, or maybe negligence, just not doing the regular checks, letting small problems become big vulnerabilities.
Or systemic issues, like higher up.
Could be, yeah. And then there's the staffing situation. That seems critical here.
How so?
The facility was reportedly running at only about 60% of its full staffing capacity.
60%? That's... wow.
Yeah. And maybe the most startling detail, the single guard who was assigned to the pod where these inmates were.
The only guard.
The only one in that specific pod, yeah. They were apparently away from the post getting food when the escape likely happened.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, that's a huge gap in supervision right when you need it most. You'd expect constant eyes on in that kind of area.
Absolutely. What are the protocols? And that leads to the other big question. Inside help.
It's definitely being looked at. I mean, how did they know about these specific weaknesses? How did they navigate the maintenance areas, tamper with the locks?
Yeah, it feels like you'd need some knowledge.
Right, some level of insider info or actual help. And the fact that 3 jail employees have been suspended while they investigate.
3 employees suspended. Okay.
That definitely adds weight to that suspicion. You know, it really highlights the human factor, the weaknesses that can come from inside.
And it's not the first time this place has had issues, is it? There's some history here.
No, it's not an isolated incident for this facility. Looking back, this escape, it kind of fits into a bit of a pattern. Security challenges seem to crop up.
Right. I remember reading, didn't someone escape back in 2023?
That's right, October 3rd, 2023, Anthony R. Moore. And what was really troubling then was the delay in telling the public.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was actually caught again before most people even knew he was gone. Which, you know, raises questions about transparency, about their protocols.
Definitely. Seems like an ongoing issue.
And if you go even further back, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, that really hit the facility hard. Back then, reports described inmates basically being abandoned because of the chaos, the emergency, which led to escapes, obviously, but driven more by, you know, desperation and the huge damage to the building.
So, putting it all together.
Yeah.
This place has shown vulnerabilities before. Katrina, the 2023 escape, now this.
Exactly. You start to see this recurring theme of vulnerability at this specific jail.
He really paints a worrying picture locally. But okay, let's zoom out now. To really get a handle on this New Orleans escape, we need that broader view, right? How common are prison breaks globally? What does the research show?
Yeah, stepping back is important because globally the picture is really varied. How often escapes happen, it depends massively on the country.
Like economic factors.
Yeah, economic stability, quality of governance, the state of the actual prisons, it all plays a huge role.
So where are they more common?
Well, for example, in parts of Africa, particularly where you have significant overcrowding, underfunding, escapes tend to be relatively more frequent. There was a huge one in Nigeria, remember, 2021. Over 1,800 inmates got out after the prison was attacked.
1,800. Wow, that puts 10 in perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows the scale of the challenge in some places. Then you look at Asia, and it's different again.
How so?
In countries with really high-tech surveillance, strong law enforcement, like, say, Singapore or Japan, escapes are super rare.
Makes sense.
But in places with conflict or maybe more corruption, like parts of Afghanistan or the Philippines, they happen more often. There was an escape in the Philippines, 2020, over 400 inmates during a riot.
So instability breeds opportunity there. What about Europe? We tend to think of European prisons as pretty secure.
Generally, yeah, that's true. They're usually well-funded, modern, so escapes are uncommon, but not impossible.
Exceptions.
Definitely. You get these really determined individuals, sometimes with resources, like that guy in France, Redouane Faïd.
Oh, I think I heard about him. Helicopter guy.
That's the one. Escaped twice. Once with explosives, once with a helicopter landing in the prison yard.
That's just audacious.
Totally. Shows that even in secure systems, you know, determined people find ways. Also worth noting, many European systems focus heavily on rehabilitation, which can sometimes mean a slightly less intense security focus for certain inmates, maybe affecting the overall approach compared to pure containment.
Interesting point. And Latin America. Reports often suggest higher escape rates there.
Yes, that's generally the case. Brazil, Venezuela, Mexico, for instance. Big factors there are, again, severe overcrowding, but also the huge influence of powerful gangs inside the prisons.
Ah, the gangs run things.
They can have significant control, which complicates security immensely. Remember, Sao Paulo 2020. During COVID tensions, over 1,300 inmates escaped across several prisons.
1,300 again. Huge numbers. So bringing it back closer to home, the U.S. versus Canada, different stories.
Quite different, yeah. In the U.S., escapes happen every year, statistically, but most are from, like, low-security places, work release programs, walkaways, basically.
Not the big Shawshank Redemption type breaks.
Exactly. Those high-profile, maximum security escapes, like Clinton Correctional in 2015, they grab headlines, but they're actually pretty rare.
Okay, and Canada.
Even rarer, and usually nonviolent offenders when they do happen. Then you look way over to Oceania, Australia, New Zealand. Very few escapes reported. Modern facilities, solid procedures.
It's fascinating, that global range.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about those really famous escapes, the ones everyone knows. Alcatraz, maybe?
Yeah.
How do they stack up against what happened in New Orleans?
Yeah, the legendary ones often showcase either incredible, meticulous planning.
Like Alcatraz.
Exactly. Alcatraz in 62. The planning there was just, wow. Digging through concrete with spoons, making dummy heads out of soap and hair.
Dummy heads, yeah.
It's almost mythical, even though we still don't know for sure if they survived the water.
Right, the mystery adds to it.
Then you have Clinton Correctional, 2015. That one actually has parallels to New Orleans. Inside help was key there, too. And exploiting structure, they cut through steel walls, took months. And Redouane Faïd in France, well, that was just pure boldness. Helicopters, explosives.
That's a different league of planning and resources, isn't it?
Totally. So when you put the Orleans Justice Center escape next to these, you see a mix. There was clearly some planning in New Orleans, but it seems they heavily relied on spotting and using existing weaknesses.
The faulty infrastructure, the staffing gap.
Precisely. It wasn't maybe as theatrically ingenious as Alcatraz, but it shows how basic failures can still lead to a major breach.
So statistically then, you mentioned U.S. numbers, maybe 2,000, 3,000 a year, mostly low security. What about the underlying causes generally?
Right. U.S. stats show that range, but again, emphasize low security mostly. Max security escapes are the outliers. Globally, data is harder to standardize, but the trend holds. Developing nations, less resource systems, generally see more escapes, often larger scale.
And the common threads, why do they happen?
The recurring factors. Understaffing is a big one, like we saw in New Orleans. Faulty infrastructure, bad locks, weak walls, deteriorating buildings. Internal corruption, that potential for inside help, is always there.
Right.
Poor inmate classification. That's basically not properly assessing how much of an escape risk someone is when they come in and where they should be housed.
Putting someone too high risk in a lower security spot.
Exactly, or not monitoring them closely enough. And sometimes external stuff, natural disasters like Katrina or civil unrest, can create chaos that leads to escapes.
But the elaborate tunnel escapes are rare.
Very rare, yeah. Most are those less dramatic walkaways. But importantly for public safety, the recapture rate is usually very high.
What kind of rate?
Often over 90%. So most who escape do get caught eventually.
Okay, that's somewhat reassuring. But the fact they happen at all, it obviously pushes prisons to evolve, right? How are they trying to prevent this stuff now? Feels like a constant cat and mouse game.
It really is, in many ways, an ongoing challenge. And yeah, there's a big push towards using more sophisticated tech in prisons now.
Like what kind of tech?
Things like AI. Using artificial intelligence to analyze inmate behavior, look for patterns that might suggest escape planning.
Wow, AI for escape prediction.
Kind of, yeah. Early warnings, also biometric scanners, fingerprints, facial recognition for better ID checks, controlling access, and geofencing or tracking wearables, especially maybe in lower security settings or work crews.
Stuff we see creeping into other parts of life, too.
Exactly. And surveillance is getting a major boost. High-def CCTV everywhere, thermal imaging cameras to see in the dark or through fog.
Thermal cameras?
Yeah. Even automated drone patrols in some places monitoring the perimeter fences.
Drones flying around prisons. Okay, what about the buildings themselves?
Facility design is evolving, too. Architects focus on eliminating blind spots, making sure guards can see everywhere, using tamper-proof fixtures and cells.
Like the toilets and sinks, making them harder to rip out.
Exactly. Things designed specifically not to be easily dismantled or turned into weapons or tools, and even things like modular wall systems engineered to be tougher to breach.
So, think back to New Orleans again. Better fixtures, maybe more cameras in those maintenance areas. That could have potentially stopped this one.
Potentially, yes. Those kinds of upgrades target the exact vulnerabilities exploited there, but then there's the human side, too.
Who's a calf?
Yeah. Big emphasis on better training for officers, more thorough background checks for everyone working there to try and weed out the risk of inside help.
Makes sense.
And that inmate classification thing we mentioned, getting better at assessing risk up front, making sure high-risk individuals get the right level of security and monitoring.
Right, proper sorting.
And interestingly, some research suggests that focusing on rehabilitation can actually help security too.
How does that work?
Well, in places that really invest in good rehab programs, education, job training, escape rates tend to be lower. The thinking is, if inmates feel they have a genuine path forward, something to lose.
They're less likely to risk it all on a desperate escape attempt.
Exactly. They might be less inclined to take that huge risk.
It all comes back to that New Orleans escape, doesn't it? It's clearly way more than just a local headline. It touches on public safety, trust in the justice system.
Absolutely. Every escape like this shakes things up. It raises basic questions about how secure our correctional systems really are. When people facing serious charges get out, it directly impacts community safety.
Yeah.
And it can erode public confidence. Plus, you have to think about the human side, the desperation that must drive someone to try escaping, and the uncertainty for everyone while they're still out there.
And it just screams that constant tension, doesn't it, between needing tight security and wanting prisons to actually rehabilitate people.
That's the core challenge, really. For prison systems everywhere, you lean too hard on security, maybe make it overly restrictive, and it can crush rehabilitation efforts, make things purely punitive.
Right.
But if you focus only on rehab and let security slip, well, you risk incidents like the one in New Orleans. Finding that balance is incredibly tough.
It demands a really nuanced approach, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Looking at the risks, but also the potential for change.
A considered approach.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things you think we and you listening should take away from all this?
Okay, I think first, the New Orleans escape clearly pinpointed some very specific, very worrying weaknesses at that jail. Infrastructure, staffing. And it wasn't the first time, suggesting deeper issues, maybe.
Right, a pattern.
Second, looking globally, prison escapes are incredibly diverse. How often, how it happens, it's all shaped by local factors, resources, governance. It's not one size fits all. And finally, the methods are always changing, both how people try to escape and how prisons try to stop them. It's this constant evolution driven by technology, by strategy, and by that tension between security and rehabilitation.
Which kind of leads to one last thought, maybe for you to chew on.
Yeah.
With escape methods always evolving and prevention tech getting more and more sophisticated, what does the future of prison security actually look like?
Yeah.
And what are the ethics of super advanced surveillance inside prisons? Is it just this endless arms race, a perpetual cycle of action and reaction? Something to definitely think about.